Hello and welcome everybody. Today I am joined by Abraha Belai. Abraha Belai is a veteran journalist and commentator on Ethiopian affairs and a very involved advocate and activist for Tigray and for Ethiopia. And today we are going to talk about the situation in Tigray now and in Ethiopia in general, and also, time permitting, in Eritrea as well, because the situation in Eritrea and Ethiopia in some sense intertwined. And thank you very much, Abraham, for joining me today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you as well, Tarlai, for having me as your guest.
It's my pleasure. So Abraha, I described you as a journalist and commentator. How would you describe yourself?
Well, I have spent much of my life as a journalist, following all the political developments in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the surrounding Horn of Africa. Therefore, you're right. My profession is in journalism, and I can be taken for a political commentator. I think that's enough.
That's yeah. I just wanted to make sure that I got your description right, Abraha. So generally, I don't ask my guests about their journey, about their personal views on Ethiopian affairs and stuff like that. But I'm going to break with tradition in your case, Abraha, and I'm going to ask you about your journey from 1991, because I think a lot of the views and opinions that you hold today. Um, Shaped by your journey, by the sort of political activism and political journey that you have had for the past maybe 30 years. So you're going to briefly take us through your journey, Avraham, and then we're going to directly go to the current situation in Tigray. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Avraham.
Okay, thank you. I was born in Raya, major southern Tigray, and attended my elementary school there, and then I moved to Addis Ababa, where I got my high school and university education. I spent much of my youthhood in Addis Ababa, and when I was a second year student at Addis Ababa University at Kilo, I was majoring in mathematics. When in the meantime, I qualified to work as a proofreader or news reporter for the English daily Ethiopian Herald. Ever since, I consider I have never deviated away from pursuing journalism as a profession, and I have attended numerous international conferences and courses as regards to media and communications in Nairobi, in Berlin, Germany, as well as the United States, as well as many conferences as well in Addis Ababa. That's when I came to the United States like 25 years ago. I launched my own media, ATM Media, which was very popular among millions of Ethiopians, and it was taken seriously by foreign governments like the United States and the US Congress, and human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and other media as well. That's briefly my journey that has brought me to the current situation. Um, I think you have asked me,
Interesting.
yeah, to comment on the current situation in Tigray. Is that right?
Yeah, Abraham. Yeah. Before we go into that, I'm going to dwell on a little bit on your media adventure, especially as it relates to Ethiopian media, Abraham, because um, I think it was maybe about 10 or 11 years ago. I do actually remember reading Ethio media, and maybe that was one of the I don't know, newspapers or websites it was online based media actually. That was my introduction to Ethiopian politics. So I do remember reading content and publications on Ethiopian media, and I think a lot of people might be interested in why or what the motivation was for you to establish Ethio Media. What was the rationale behind Ethio Media? What did you think you achieved with that?
Well, as a journalist, I was looking to have my own media. There was almost nothing at that time where Ethiopians can express, can share their ideas. In the meantime, I was, as a journalist, resentful of what was going on in Ethiopia under the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi administration, especially in Tigray. And the war with Eritrea also prompted me to launch Ethio Media so that we can have a platform where people can freely express their ideas. That was the main motive behind launching Ethio Media. Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah,
I mean,
yes.
the media for a journalist, as you know, is like a gun for a soldier. A soldier cannot operate without a gun or any, arms. Therefore, I felt disarmed without having any media of my own, our own, especially after the war, the 1998-2000 war with Eritrea. The need to have an independent media was a necessity because most of the media production that was coming out of Ethiopia was just a propaganda, and the international community, as well as the people of Ethiopia themselves, were not getting a factual information. Yeah.
Right. Good. We're going to come back to your contribution to Ethiopian politics with your Ethio Media and your opposition to the Meles regime, and also your opposition to the Ethiopia-Eritrea war, and generally your opposition to the APRDF. I think we're going to talk about that in the second part of this interview, Avraham. But for now, I'm going to take you directly to the current situation in Tigray, and uh, if you could tell us a little bit about what you think the Tigray government is doing now, what your assessment is of the situation in Tigray now, where you think the Tigray government has been has been doing positively, and where you think the Tigray government has been deficient. So it's a lot of questions bundled in one, but you could start from whichever you want. But your assessment of the current situation of Tigray, Abraha. I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, thank you, Taklai. The situation in Tigray remains dire as hundreds of thousands of IDPs still couldn't return to their ancestral homelands occupied by Amhara and Eritrean forces. It's almost approaching 1 year since the Ethiopian federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, signed the Pretoria Agreement in November 2022. Yeah. But little or nothing has changed for those millions displaced by the genocidal war that started in November 2020 and ended in November 2022. As you know, widespread ethnic cleansing has taken place in Western Tigray, and this has continued to this very day. In recent days, Amhara forces, it was reported in the media, rounded up Tigrayans from Humera, Dansha, Mai Kadra, and many other areas. I don't know where they have taken them. Their whereabouts remains unknown. Such crimes are reported continuously by social media activists like you, Tahlai, but such calls have fallen on deaf ears. And if there is any exception to this, is what Abraha Belai, the defense minister, posted on his social media page, that the IDPs who have been uprooted from their homes in like Western Tigray, Europe, Zalambesa, South Tigray, like Alamata, and Korem, and Waja, Bala, Charter, and so many other areas will be returned to their homes shortly. This is very good news. And this has come from Defense Minister Abraha Belai. But Abraham didn't put a clear date, although he sounded promising that the suffering of the IDPs would come to an end anytime soon. And what's second most important point from the speech of Defense Minister Abraha Belai is that the local administrations established during the genocidal war, established by the Amhara occupying forces, would be dismantled, and the IDPs will have their own local administrations. This is very promising indeed. We look forward to the implementation of, to the implementation of what the defense minister has said. And efforts are, he said, efforts are being made at federal level, that the federal forces would take over or control the areas, and it may resolve the disputes according to the constitution of the country. This is the first time that Abraha Belai, the defense minister, has come forward with a promise to the millions of Tigrayans who have endured untold hardship and suffering in many areas across Tigray. So that's what I hope. And if Abraha is involved in the implementation of, the implementation that the IDPs will be returned to their homes, that the local administrations that were established during the last 2 years would be dismantled, that those returnees will elect their own local officials. That's an enormously good news. All the people, what the people need is a break, a break from their suffering. The next one is my comment on the Getachew government. Well, while it is gratifying to say that a relatively young, educated, and a university law professor has assumed leadership in Tigray, unlike the old hand from TPLF. But I think the interim government of Mr. Getachew is not living up to the expectations of the people. the interim administration was expected to dismantle the highly abusive, corrupt, and brutal TPLF network from the regional level down to the village. But unfortunately, nothing has changed much, to the frustration of the Tigray people. TPLF is very much despised for its brutal tactics, that even at this moment, when millions are expecting humanitarian aid, a return to normal life, those local TPLF officials are forcing the people to pay taxes and make other forced contributions that may amount to extortion. The desperate people are calling the interim administration toothless, because despite all kinds of abuses, like the people who suffer when there is no government, when the people are like stateless, the people are calling the Getachew government toothless. It's not taking any action against the very abusive TPLF officials who have bounced back to power after a lull of 2 years because of the genocide. I believe the Tigray people pin their hopes on the budding opposition parties, though they themselves are being targeted by the ruling party that lacks recognition at federal level, but is the de facto government in Tigray. The Getachew government is also being criticized for doing little or nothing to expedite the return of the IDPs, nor alerting the federal government to stop ongoing ethnic cleansing by the Amhara and Eritrean forces. I think that's what I can say about the current situation in Tigray, that millions are out there in the field as IDPs, hungry for food, hungry for medicine, hungry for a settled life, hungry to go back to their beloved homes. So in the course of this, the only thing that came as a promise, as a promising news, as a promising development, is what Dr. Abraha Belai, the defense minister, said, that the IDPs, that the government, the federal government, is working to expedite the quick return of the IDPs, as well as to dismantle what the occupiers had installed as local administrations in Western Tigray. That's it.
Hmm. Hmm. We're going to draw on a little bit on the post by Abraham Belai. Abraham, you say that is one positive thing. That is one step in the right direction. That is promising. And I have been sort of observing the discussion that a lot of Tigrans on social media have been having yesterday and today about the post. And one of the issues that has been raised is, what exactly does he mean? It's not really clear what he meant by the post. It's a bit convoluted in terms of the meaning. So, for instance, in one point, he seems to suggest that Western Tigray and Southern Tigray will return to Tigray, and they will be under the Tigrayan administration. But at another point, he seems to suggest that actually federal forces will remain there and they would be under federal administration. It's just that people who had been displaced from those places will return to those areas, but it's not necessarily the case that the administration would be returned to Western Tigray. So it's not really clear what he meant, and I would like to know what your reading of the post is. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even if assuming that he was very clear, he was very categorical in what he said, is he the sort of person you would trust, given that, let's face it, he posted what he posted under the permission of Abiy Ahmed. There is no way that Abraham would have posted the thing without the permission of Abiy Ahmed. And when Abiy Ahmed says or writes one thing, there is always an ulterior motive behind everything. And the ulterior motive now could be to appease Mike Hammer, because Mike Hammer, I think, is going to visit Ethiopia in a couple of days. And they want to say that they have taken steps to implement the Pretoria Agreement. So they are saying things for diplomatic purposes, but actually they don't mean what they say. So there are a lot of issues that people raise because, again, given the nature of the Ethiopian regime, everybody's entitled or everybody's sort of justified in being very, very cynical when it comes to stuff that Abraham or Abiy Ahmed say. So two things. First of all, is it clear to your mind what Abraham meant by what he posted? And second of all, do you trust him?
Let me start with the second question. Yes, I trust Abraham Belai because he's very close to Abiy Ahmed. I don't think Abraham Belai made the decision by himself. Like I said, there is no way Abraham would unilaterally post such a statement without the approval of his boss, the prime minister. And it is, I would say, very, very rare that Abraham has appeared on the media and talk about Tigray, especially after his disgraceful exit from Tigray, like over a year ago. What makes Abraham's statement unique is that it is very bold. He said the IDPs that the government is working on he didn't specify the project or the program, but he said the government is working to expedite the return of the IDPs to their ancestral homelands. And that's by itself is big news. The second one is, the second most important is that the Amhara had installed local administrations, and because they took it for granted that those annexed Tigray lands would remain under their control forever. But Abraham has come to say that any local administrations installed by the Amhara forces would be dismantled. Well, he's a defense minister. He's a very close associate of the prime minister. I don't think he is under any political pressure to please the affected IDPs or the people of Tigray or the local administration. He could have stated that there is no specific date that the IDPs would be returned. He didn't say that. He said clearly that they are working round the clock to expedite the return of the IDPs. And the second one, anything installed, counter to the constitution would be dismantled. And that is the local administrations. He didn't mention about the tens of thousands of Amhara settlers that the occupiers installed, deployed or settled in the occupied lands. No one knows, and I don't think that is an issue. Could be a third or a fourth degree issue, but it was not mentioned what would be the fate of those tens of thousands of Amhara settlers who were evicted from other parts of the country and settled in Western Tigray in a bid to change the demography in favor of them. The other one is social media activists can truly express anger or frustration and may doubt the truthfulness of Abraham Belai's statements, like saying, "Oh, this is another tactic to buy time or to force the people," because such things have been going on by other officials, especially from the prime minister at federal government, at federal level, and at regional level by individuals like General Tadesse Warere, who every week was coming to tell the people that the siege would be broken anytime soon. But irrespective of the famine, the hunger, and the appalling living conditions that our people were enduring, General Tadesse did nothing to break the siege, and our people continue to suffer. They are still under siege. So if people are frustrated by what the defense minister has posted, I don't blame them. But on my part, there is some serious development I can read between the lines of Abraha's posting. So we're gonna see the federal government involved in the to speed up the return of the IDPs. The other one that I would like to comment on is in the statement Abraham made that instead of the local Tigrayan administration, interim government, it would be the federal forces that will take over these areas. This is very controversial, but given the war situation, the war that is raging between the federal government and the Amhara forces, I think it is understandable that the federal government is being careful not to sprinkle gasoline on what's going on, on the war that's raging between the government and those forces in Amhara. Therefore, to somewhat water down, they may have said those they are not disputed, those authentic lands of Tigray would, for a while, fall under the federal government administration. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a totally reasonable point of view, Abraham, and I'm not sure that I would disagree with that. And at any rate, I'm not in a position to go into any argument now. But there are some people who say that the reason Abraham posted that is to sort of give Tigrayans an incentive to get involved in the conflict between the Amhara Fano and the federal government. And so, in a way, Abiy is now saying, all right, I have decided to return Western Tigray and parts of Raya that are under the illegal occupation of the Fano forces. And the reason that hasn't happened yet is because the Fano are forcefully occupying it. And because I'm fighting them now, the only way that you could ensure the return of the territories is by getting involved in the war. So there are people who say that he is trying to give the Tigrayans an incentive to get involved in the war, and it doesn't look like you have that sort of impression, do you?
Well, I do, but that's not dictating me to change my position. As that they may do it. They didn't state clearly that take Western Tigray, take Europe, Zalambasa back, or South Tigray back to your fold, but in exchange for you to get into the war against, my enemies. I would say they can simultaneously conduct, while expediting the return of the IDPs because of the international pressure as well. We shouldn't forget about that, because the US and the European Union and African observers have been consistent highlighting the plight and suffering of the IDPs, that they should be returned. Therefore, he may be answering to the international community that he is living up to the commitment he made in the Pretoria Agreement. But the Pretoria Agreement, unless amended, forbids Tigrayan forces to pick up arms again. To pick up arms. It clearly states that the Tigrayans should disarm their army, should never resort to violent means in any way possible, and it is up to the federal forces to take up arms and defend the people and the country. Therefore, I don't know how Abiy would achieve, although it is very clear he would like to get the support of the Tigray forces in the war against the Amhara forces. But that is honestly, up to the political leaders of Tigray and the federal to decide whether those Amhara forces are their strategic enemies or not. So we have to wait and see if there could be an amendment to the Pretoria Agreement, because it forbids, it deprives the Tigrayans to engage themselves in any armed conflict whatsoever. That's my position.
Yeah. Abraha, so you said at the beginning that you were born in Raya, and as you just mentioned, is huge parts of Raya that have been illegally occupied by the Amhara Fano, and it just occurred to me that that you might have been personally affected in that sense, in the sense that your family members might have found themselves at the receiving end of what is happening. So I don't know if you want to go into personal issues, but just to sort of give you a signal that about that, I'm totally fine. I can go to the.
Okay. Taklai, there is a communication breakdown. Your speech is being interrupted.
Oh.
And yeah.
Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now, Abraham?
I hear you, and I have more or less heard your question. I can briefly comment on on southern Tigray, because my family members hail from that region, part of Tigray. Yes, unbelievable developments have been witnessed in southern Tigray. I would say Tigrinya-speaking business owners have been evicted, beginning the outbreak of the hostilities, outbreak of the genocidal war. The entire property owned by Tigrayans was confiscated by the Amhara militias, Fano and stuff like that. So people fled. Tigrayans fled from their native homes, from areas they call homes for a long time. They fled because they were scared of their life. For instance, I know one person who had a modern hotel. He fled for his life, and his hotel was taken over. Now, after 2 years, only the structure stands. Everything is stripped off, and stands like an abandoned building without windows, without doors. Forget about the beds, furniture, tables, etc., and many machinery, around the kitchen, and electric generators, stuff like that. So people like Tigrayans, it was a time of life and days. They preferred to stay alive and left everything that they earned during their lifetime behind for the invaders to confiscate and share the properties, the wealth among themselves. Therefore, there is a very harrowing story looming large in southern Tigray as well. There is a glimmer of hope now that the federal forces are, chasing the occupiers, and hopefully the Tigray people might return to their homes, although they are empty. Yeah.
So, Abraha, you say that you're not overly happy about the Getachew administration. You say that it should have rid Tigray of corruption. You say that it should have brought about a total maybe I wouldn't say revolution, but reform in terms of how it goes about doing business. And reading between the lines in what you said, it looks like that you believe, again, you're going to correct me if I am not right in my assessment of what you think. You believe that Getachew Reda is trying to take Tigray in one direction, but that there is a force that is preventing him from doing that. That seems to be what you believe. And I would like you to go into a little bit of detail in that direction. I want you to tell me, because we have to speak in clear terms here. So if Getachew is trying to bring about reform, first of all, what are the reforms that you think Getachew is trying to bring about? And who do you think are the people, or maybe the group, who are trying to get in the way?
Well, like I said, the interim administration of Getachew Reda was expected to dismantle the very corrupt TPLF network that stretches from the top down to the bottom, to the family level. Okay, they are known for being corrupt. TPLF officials at every level have made life for the Tigray people unbearable. And now, after 2 years of war, death, and destruction, the TPLF, the former TPLF officials, are back in power from top to bottom and are exacting heavy taxes on the people who have nothing to eat, let alone to pay taxes. They are forcing them, unless you want to get a government aid, you have to pay this amount of money. If you want to get this, you have to pay this amount of money. And that money is not for any development purpose. It is for their own personal expenditure. Therefore, the expectation that Getachew Reda will be tough and dismantle TPLF, the TPLF structure, that we would bring in new, young, charismatic, selfless Tigrayans to power, so that the people can have a sigh of relief, was never materialized, because we didn't see Getachew taking any measures like a young government, like a young president. So, in fact, what he did is he consolidated the former TPLF officials to come back and monitor his activities. Of course, rumors are flying around that that the TPLF officials are trying to discredit the Getachew government. No, I believe they would never refrain from doing that, from discrediting Getachew. But Getachew is saying, I am one of you. So let's work together with his old bosses, the TPLF bosses like Debretsion and others, Aleph, Mongiorno, you know. And they consider him as their own delegates, that they are from superior and that he is a junior TPLF official. Although the federal government, I think, doesn't anymore recognize TPLF, but they are the de facto leader, the government in Tigray. Therefore, the expectation of Getachew was such that he would appeal to the Tigray people to help, to back up, to support his young government. Getachew will appeal on TDF, young men and women, to be his backup force, because he is bound to take some radical measures that the old TPLF chieftains may find uncomfortable. Getachew hasn't done any change whatsoever as far as removing, or sending away TPLF officials are concerned. We didn't see change. In fact, things are going, business is going as usual. The young opposition parties are still facing harassment. They are being denied even to rent a meeting hall. Owners of hotels are being threatened by unknown men of the government and of TPLF that they shouldn't rent their hall or meeting hall, conference hall to any opposition parties like Wunat or South or Baitana, whatever. Therefore, I wish Getachew Reda was charismatic enough and approached the TPLF structure that has blade, how would I express, make our people bleed to death. They were responsible as well for bringing the war. Partly they were responsible. And for all the devastations, these people were meant to stand before a law, before courts of justice, not to go back to their former positions and, continue their high-handedness, their very brutal rule over our people. I think that's it.
Yeah. I think we're going to linger on this a little bit, Abraham, because I think it's a critical point that you raise. So you say that Getachew was expected to bring about fundamental change, and when you say he was expected, I presume you mean that people had expected him, Tigrans, and given his relatively youthful age, and because he's more he's capable of reading the mood of the people, either from what people are saying on social media, and generally have an understanding of what people demand. I understand why you would say that he was sort of best positioned to bring about fundamental change. So I totally understand that. But I think what other people might say, Abraham, is that first of all, Getachew is not ideologically opposed to the people that you mentioned, to, for instance, to Debrecen or to Mongiorno or to the other people that a lot of people suspect might be the obstacles or the stumbling blocks now. We don't have any evidence that Getachew is opposed to them on an ideological basis. So that is the first thing. And the second thing is that we don't have any evidence, again, to say that Getachew was actually committed to bringing bring about fundamental change in Tigray. There are no signs for us to arrive at that conclusion. So I would like to ask you, or maybe for you to elaborate on that. Why, first of all, why did you think that Getachew wanted to bring about fundamental change? And second of all, why did you think that they with the Debrecyans and the Monjoros and the other people, sort of the people in the upper echelons of the TPLF, try out the fundamental change that you mentioned? I don't know if I have made the question clear. Abraham, if not,
Yeah,
please feel free to
yeah,
yeah.
it's very clear. The reason why I say that expectations were high, that Getachew Reda will bring about some meaningful reform to Tigray is, although he comes from the TPLF itself, from the belly of the TPLF, he himself was a Central Committee and Politburo member, Executive Committee member, and eventually he is now the president of the interim administration. The reason why expectations were high that Getachew will bring about a desirable change is, unlike the TPLF officials who were groomed through the 17 years of struggle against the Derg, Getachew comes from a different corner. In fact, he comes from around the academic world. He was an instructor at Maqala University, a law professor. Given that he is well read, given that he has never been through the armed struggle or the Marxist-Leninist League Tigray sort of indoctrination, given that he is relatively younger, and given that his exposure to the Western world, he frequently meets with diplomats, European diplomats, American diplomats on many occasions. The expectation was Getachew would fully understand the blunders of TPLF, how TPLF plunged the Tigray people into genocide, into death and destruction, that he would have the courage, the charisma, the resentment to pull his people out of the crisis that they are currently in. He would take, of course, to carry out some reforms. There could be a price Getachew is ready to pay. What we shouldn't forget is Abiy Ahmed was also in the same position like Getachew Reda. He came from EPRDF, out of EPRDF, but he immediately dismantled the TPLF structure and installed his own loyal men and women in power. Although Abiy Ahmed took the wrong.
Abraha, if I could interject, Abraha, if I could interject, I'm really sorry. I generally don't like
Okay.
to cut off people, but if I could interject a bit,
Go ahead.
because you mentioned Abiy, for instance, because I was going to bring about the kind of change that Abiy, that the kind of change that we after integrate, the kind of change within air quotes that Abiy brought about in Ethiopia in 2018.
Say it again. I didn't get the question.
So Abiy came from the belly of the APRDF, right?
Right.
And he embarked on bringing about a change within the APRDF. So he disbanded the APRDF, he formed his own party, and eventually he converted the party into his own personal project, right? A one-man project essentially now. So is that the kind of change that we want Getachew to bring about in Tigray?
Well, what we have to see is at least Abiy Ahmed, no matter how detrimental his measures are or the outcome of his changes are, but he immediately, swiftly dismantled the security apparatus, as you know, the key positions in the defense minister, the interior ministry, and the key economic establishments of the country, and the armed forces. He never faced. He never faced any opposition. TPLF simply bowed and retreated to Mekelle. Irrespective of what developed later, that Abiy Ahmed's measures were disastrous, especially after he picked up Isaias Afwerki as his own confidant. Getachew didn't try a single change to effect a single change, a small change in Tigray. Everything is as it was. You know, he could have, with the help, he is first of all appointed by the federal government. He's appointed by Mr. Abiy Ahmed, to be clearly. It means wherever Getachew Reda asks help in case of an emergency situation in Tigray, he will get the support of Abiy Ahmed, because it is Abiy Ahmed who appointed Getachew as his rep in Tigray. Therefore, Getachew would have the opportunity, he could have had the golden chance of introducing some democratic changes, like setting up or encouraging the opposition parties who are led by young, like himself, highly educated Tigrayans, who for many years have been struggling for the betterment of the people of Tigray. They never got a chance. Therefore, Getachew failed to effect even the slightest change. And things are running the way, when TPLF was running the region before the outbreak of the war. And some people say today's conditions are even worse, because there is a breakdown of the rule of law. There is no sense of security. People are being robbed in broad daylight. Houses are being broken into, and people are being killed. Therefore, Getachew's failure are many, but let's stop it here. And he couldn't even guarantee the safety of the Tigray people, let alone to introduce radical or some kind of reforms. Yeah. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Well, Abraha, you say let's stop here, and I understand why you would say that, and I don't want this to change into a debate, because I'm trying to get your views on a lot of other issues as well. But I think I'm going to try to get one. I'm going to try to squeeze one point of view from you on this matter. So one of the subjects for which he seemed to be complimenting Abiy, and you're going to correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Abraha, but one of the things that he seemed to have a positive assessment on regarding Abiy is that as soon as he came to power, he swiftly changed a lot of things. He brought about a lot of change very, very swiftly, right? And one of the mechanics of doing that was he removed a lot of people from the old regime, let's say, and he brought to the front his own people, and that was how he brought about change. But other people might say, actually, one of the reasons why Abiy is now in a very, very tricky and difficult position, a very weakened man. He doesn't have allies in, let's face it, he doesn't have allies in Amhara. He doesn't have true allies in Tigray. He doesn't really have true allies even in Oromia, like people like Lemma have been sidelined. And one of the reasons why that happened was he wasn't very meticulous and very careful in the way that he brought about change. He should have been very careful, should have been very slow, he should have done everything very gradually without alienating people. And but because he failed to do those things, because he was very quick and very swift, like I said, he's in a very difficult position now. And if Getachew was to do what Abiy did in 2018, he would be in as much of a difficult position now in Tigray. Do you get the point that I'm trying to drive at, Abraha? So
Yes.
if Getachew was here, for instance, I'm not trying to defend Getachew, but if Getachew was here, he might say, well, I'm trying to strike a balance between working with the federal government on the one hand and trying to make sure that everybody on the Tigray side is on board. Because number one, I don't want to alienate anybody, and number two, I don't want to create an opportunity for Abiy to come in and exploit some sort of divide between, Getachew group and Debrecen group. So I'm trying to make sure that we are operating and functioning as a unit. I think that would be something that Getachew might say in his defense.
Well, to begin with, I'm not approving the changes that Abiy Ahmed made. What I'm saying is Abiy took swift measures, irrespective of such measures were good or bad for the country. Of course, later on, they turned out to be disastrous, I would rather say. But he didn't spend the time to make changes, to take measures to remove the old TPLF structure, TPLF dominated government, and install his own. Where did he go wrong? If I may ask myself, well, slowly, Abiy Ahmed, instead of trusting the Ethiopian people, he trusted the Eritrean dictator Isaias Afwerki more than anyone else. He thought Isaias would be, by keeping Isaias by his side, he will have no problem. By then, the moment Abiy Ahmed picked up Isaias, including myself, we expressed alarm that it was the beginning of the downfall of Abiy Ahmed. Now, what we are talking about is not whether Abiy made the right decision or the wrong, whether he took changes, whether he took correct measures or wrong measures. No, we are commending him on taking measures once he seized power. Along the way, he picked up the wrong people while expelling the individuals or those who could have been, good enough for him to administer the country wisely. By the same token, what I'm saying about Getachew is the Tigray people have suffered enormously under one-party rule, under TPLF, for nearly half a century. TPLF was the ruler while they were conducting the rebel war against the military regime for 17 years. They administered much of the rural population of Tigray. And once they seized power for 27 years, again, they were the same party. Therefore, very close to 50 years, the people have endured enormous suffering. Now, the intervention was when Getachew, a relatively young, someone who has never been to the armed struggle, someone who didn't go through the Marxist-Leninist League of Tigray indoctrination that changed much of the TPLF officials into the zombies of the political system. Getachew was much hoped that he would be a change seeker. He would come as a relief to the suffering of the people, that he would immediately or step by step dismantle the system, the TPLF network that has served as a political cancer to the Tigrayan society. Therefore, it is within that context that I say the Getachew government, although 6 months have passed since he came, or 6 months or 8 months since he assumed the administration, but nothing has changed. In fact, things are getting worse under his administration.
I do totally see the point that you are making, Abraha, and it's completely defensible, even a plausible point of view. I was just trying to make you see the maybe alternative point of view as well. I would have loved if Getachew was here to give us his point of view, to justify why he's doing one thing or not doing one thing. I think that would have been fascinating, but maybe that is too much to hope. So just one final point on this, Abraham. If you were the political advisor of Getachew Reda as of today, for instance, what would you advise him to do?
I would advise him, one, to rally the Tigray people behind him, because he is to introduce changes, and then, he may encounter formidable forces against him. Two, I would again organize, especially the young generation that have been untouched by the toxic political programs of TPLF, and guide them along a new line of political thought and reform, that they should dismantle the old Bolshevik structure, that let Bolshevik be replaced by TPLF, that it is killing our people from within, that in doing so, he may encounter again formidable opposition at the risk of even his own life. Therefore, I would anyways advise Mr. Getachew to immediately rally, identify his backup forces, especially the Tigray people, and start taking reforms to dismantle TPLF and introduce new changes. Give the people, empower the people to elect their own local officials. Now the old TPLF officials are going down the network from Kulin to Zoba, then Wereda, Abia, Kushet, and down to, as spy level, even at the level of a family. Such hierarchy, such chain of repression should be broken to pieces by, under the guidance of Getachew Reda. I would call on the young army officers within TDF to appeal to them to help him liberate Tigray people from the suffering that they have endured for a long time. Um, this is basically what I would say. First, get the people behind you, and then introduce, reforms to dismantle the old killing machine, um, the one that is the TPLF network, straight but top to bottom, that has been abusing our people. Nothing is being changed so far. So, as an advisor, what I will say is simply these two big points.
So would you? Uh, I see that, Abraham. Would you go as far as to say that they, I know, Getachew and the people around him should just move on from the TPLF and form maybe a brand new political party, a fresh political party, and rally the Tigray people around that party rather than bring members of the TPLF and cling on to the TPLF when in fact, like you said, a lot of people are really sick and tired of the TPLF. So would you to to sort of be to the point? Would you advise Getachew to just move on from the TPLF thing as a whole?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend Getachew to break clean with TPLF, because TPLF has doomed the people, has brought the people down to the precipice of extinction. Look how their political blunders led to. The people are paying paying the heavy price for the political blunders, the political ignorance of TPLF, and they are like, they are acting like they know it all, although they are the cause of all this death and destruction of the people. I would definitely recommend Getachew Reda to act like a new government, to seek support from the young generation, to cut clean with the old regime, to remove all those oldies of TPLF officials from around him. Or if he doesn't have the guts, if he doesn't have the charisma to do it, then he should step down and hand it over to someone who can introduce reforms. Yeah.
So Avraham, to give some sort of the TPLF ideologically all his life, and part of the reason why you say that we should move on from the TPLF also comes from the fact that you have always been opposed to it anyways. I think that's fair to say. If I'm wrong, you'll correct me. And in fact, my hope was that in this interview, we would talk about why you started opposing the TPLF from the get go. What were your reasons? What were the rationale? What did you think the TPLF was doing wrong? But I think we don't have time to do that today, Avraham. So maybe we're going to schedule another interview for that. And actually, sadly, the reason why I wanted us to do this interview in English was because I thought we would talk about issues outside Tigray, issues that other people from Ethiopia might find interesting, and issues that even Western diplomats might find interesting. That was my reason for why I wanted us to do this interview in English. But as it turned out, we remained confined to Tigray because there's a lot related to Tigray to talk about, and I think it was a discussion worth our time. Um, so we're going to leave this interview at that. Abraha, if you have something that you would like to add related to Tigray, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that. But otherwise, we're going to leave that at that.
Yeah, I mean, the Tigray, as you know, is the most important subject for us, especially the people of Tigray, like us. Why we focus on Tigray? Because Tigray has been the subject of a huge devastation since World War II. Tigray lost 1.2 million people in a span of 2 years out of a population of 6 or 7 million Tigrayans. When you compare that to Syria, Syria had a population of 26 or 28 million people, but Syria lost about 330,000 lives in a span of 10 years. You can imagine the comparison. To lose 1.2 million people out of 6 million people, and in this span of 2 years, it shows you Tigray will continue a serious topic for many years to come, for many generations to come. Tigray has been devastated. And if anyone doesn't know what the word devastation means, when you lose factories, universities, colleges, clinics, that every infrastructure is dismantled, destroyed, that millions of people have nothing to eat, that they have nothing to go to visit as a clinic or a hospital. Well, in fact, we have spent a fraction of our time on Tigray because at the end of the program, what matters to us or to any individual with a great humanitarian concern is how evil forces destroyed a proud part of Ethiopia, how they destroyed the people who have been preserving the relative independence of Ethiopia as an independent and sovereign nation. Therefore, we can come who led Tigray to this kind of disaster. We can talk any other time, but for now, if I have to make one last appeal, it is to President Getachew and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to expedite the return of the millions of IDPs who have endured 2 years of suffering all over Tigray, and to force to liberate Tigray areas still occupied by the invaders and help return Tigray to normal life. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. And if I may speak in Tigrinya briefly.
Please.
Yeah, I'm wearing a traditional costume because in Tigray today is Ashenda is being celebrated. ኩልኻትም ደቂ ትግራይ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ዋዕረታት ትግራይ ጀጋኑ ኩለኹም ደቂ ትግራይ እንኳዕ ለአሸንዳ ኣብፅሐኩም ትልመፅሎ ግዜ በእውነት ብዙሕ ዝተሳቀየ ህዝብና ናይ ግዜ ሰላም ናይ ራህዋን ቅሳነት ይግበረሉ ክብለኩም ይፈቱ የቀኒየለይ ዝሓወይ ተክላይ
Yeah, Anil, thank you for that elegant costume as well. I think you have put me to shame because I'm wearing my extremely casual denim shirt, and you are in that elegant Tigrayan costume. And I'm so happy that you have decided to wear that. So like I said, Abraham, maybe I'm going to schedule another interview, and in that we're going to talk about why you were a staunch critic of the Medles regime, of the EPRDF regime generally. What were your ideological grounds for your strong opposition, so much so that you established your own medium and you allowed people who were very viscerally opposed to the EPRDF to write their commentaries. And we're going to talk about why you briefly supported Abiy Ahmed when he first came to power, and then you swiftly changed your position. And we're going to also talk about what are the lessons that we as Tigrayans should learn and should have learned from the war, because I think it's very important that we take very important lessons from the war. So we're going to talk about those very, very important issues in our second interview. But for today, that was that. And I'm really, really grateful to you for your time, Abraha. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure as well. Hope to see you soon.
And to our viewers, thank you for staying with us. As I always say, if you like what we do, don't forget to subscribe, to share, and generally to spread the content around to your friends, to your acquaintances. That will mean a lot to us, because the more people view the interviews, the more likely that we're going to get big guests in next time. So thank you for that, and bye bye for today.